Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another pre-recorded lesson video. Today is Wednesday, December 2nd. This week is just flying by, and it's going to be winter break before we know it, y'all. So let's buckle in, make sure we're getting all our assignments turned in, not just for this class, but for all our classes. I want you all to get great grades in all your classes. So let's buckle in. If you need help on anything, just let me know, right? I'm always here. I'm always available to make sure that um, everything's going well. I'm here to help, right? So today's lesson is a really important one. What we're going to do today is I'm going to show y'all how to basically write an introduction, right? And a thesis statement. Okay, so we're going to go over what an introduction is, what should be in it. Then I'm going to show you a couple examples of an introduction that a past student wrote that they did a really good job in on the STAR test, and then I'm going to show you an introduction that I wrote, and then after that, it's going to be your turn to write an introduction for this essay. Okay. Before we start, if you did not attend the virtual class yesterday for Tuesday, December 1st, please go ahead and watch that pre-recorded lesson video because it's a really important video. It's basically me just introducing the essay and what's going to be about and what I'm expecting in the essay, right? Sort of the structure of it. So if you haven't seen that video, I want you to exit out of this video, go watch that first, and then come back, okay? Just so that we're all caught up. But let's get started with today's lesson, okay? So a quick review from yesterday. Remember, just to make sure that y'all clearly know what the essay is about, is remember this essay that we're writing is about the psychological effects of war. Psychological is basically just a big word for the mental effects of war, right? Especially in Paul, okay? So you're going to just pick one mental effect of war from the book and how it changes Paul, right? So you can talk about Paul's personality change or how he feels powerless in a situation. Powerless basically just means, how he has no control over anything that's happening to him, right? Or his hopelessness of, him basically saying he doesn't really have a future after the war. Or you can write about his priorities, which can be another form of change, right? Where the stuff that he liked or cared about in the past doesn't matter to him anymore. Those are just some of the things that you could write about. You just have to choose one, right? If you want to brainstorm another thing, I know a couple students that are writing about the trauma of war, like the PTSD, that the nightmares that they're facing. That's another great one as well. Remember, there's a lot of mental effects that you can write about. It doesn't have to just be these four, as long as you can pick two events, right? Two events, two examples from the book that you can help support that, okay? Remember, the structure of this essay is going to be 4 paragraphs. First one's going to be an intro with the thesis statement. That's what we're going to go over today. Then the next one's going to be 2 body paragraphs, okay? 1 paragraph for each event or example that you find in the book, and I'm expecting quotes, okay? And then the last paragraph is going to be a conclusion. I don't think this essay is going to be very hard, especially when I'm going to give y'all 2 weeks to work on it. So you're going to have plenty of time, and I promise that I'm going to be with you every step of the way, providing feedback, making sure that we're all headed in the right direction, okay? But that's just a little review from yesterday. Let us get started with today's lesson about intro and thesis. So the introduction. So your introduction is going to have 3 parts to it. It's going to have the opening sentence, or another word for that is your hook. Then it's going to have a context, and then it's going to have a thesis statement. Your introduction should be around, I want to say 4 to 5 sentences. It can be more. Okay. Your opening sentence should only be, or your hook should only be 1 sentence. Your context is going to be the meat of your introduction, where it's going to be a lot of the information provided. And then your thesis statement, okay, is going to be 1 sentence as well. Usually 1 sentence. So your hook is what you're going to use to draw the reader in, right? We want to start this paper off with a bang, right? And make sure that the reader is engaged right from the beginning. And then it's going to lead into the context. The context is going to be the information that you're going to need to provide the reader to help understand what you're writing about, right? Whenever you're writing, you should always write for an audience or a reader that has no idea what you're talking about. So for this essay, act like you're writing to somebody that has never read the book or doesn't know anything about the book. Okay, so the context is basically the background information that you're going to need to give about Paul for the reader to understand the change he's going through, right? And then your thesis statement is basically you answering what the essay is about and providing your stance on it. So you could think about for your thesis statement, the question we're answering for this essay is, what is the one change that you see in Paul throughout the book? And you could write about the powerlessness or other things like that, right? Those four things or anything else you come up with is basically you stating what your position is on this paper. Okay, and just so we make it clear, I'm going to give you all examples of all three, right? From a past student and from my own example. But hopefully this makes sense because we are going to start with the hook, right? You're going to want to begin your paper with an opening sentence or hook. It's going to be about your topic that catches the reader's attention, right? You're basically going to start your paper off by trying to catch the reader's attention, right? You want to start it off with a bang, right? And engage the reader immediately. So how you can do that is you can start your paper off with a lot of different ways. You can start with a quote, right? If you're writing about hope or hopelessness, you can start a quote about that has to deal with hope, right? You can start it off with a question. The example that I wrote, I started off my paper with a question as well. You can put yourself into the paper and give you a personal experience about you. You can give it a fascinating fact. I think a definition is a great way to start it off, right? If you're writing about hopelessness, maybe give a definition about what hope is first, right? And those are just a couple of the ways that you can start your paper off. But as long as it's engaging and it has a bang to it, like a punch, right? Because you want to start this paper off on a good note, and you want to make sure that the reader is engaged from the beginning. Because if the beginning isn't great and it doesn't catch the reader's attention, then maybe the rest of the paper doesn't really catch their attention, right? So that's basically what your hook is going to be. I always recommend maybe starting off with a question or a definition or a relevant quote. I think those are great ways to do it. But there's multiple ways, and whatever way you're comfortable doing it, then do that, okay? And that's going to lead us into context, okay? Your context is basically the bridge between your hook and your thesis, right? This is basically where you're going to be providing the information to your reader to help understand the topic or help understand Paul in the book, okay? And I'm going to show you a little bit of context that I put from the book that would help the reader, right? This is going to be the meat of your introduction. This is where a lot of your sentences are going to come from, is your context. Okay, this is the background information that the reader is going to need to help understand your paper and the topic that you chose. Okay, just think of it as a bridge between your hook and your thesis. And then that's leading us into the thesis. You're probably familiar with the thesis statement. You've probably had to write one in your science class in the past. So your thesis is going to state your position on the topic that you will support with evidence in your body paragraphs, right? This is basically what your paper is about. This is the sentence that is saying, hey, this paper is about this. This is the argument I'm making, right? You are taking a stance and you are stating it. Okay, you're basically answering the question of what this paper is about in your own words, okay? And I cannot state this enough. For your thesis statement, you should never, ever, ever state what your essay is about in direct terms. Okay, so never say in this essay I will write about, this essay will tell you about, or I'm going to write about. You should never state it directly, okay? And I'm going to give you examples of how to write a thesis statement without having to use those words, right? So I promise this is going to make a lot more sense whenever I provide the examples, okay? So this is an example that a student did in the past, right? This student did a great job on the STAR test. This is a great introduction. So the hook is in red. The hook is teenage years, a rite of passage, a time of laughter, and unforgettable memories, or at least it ought to be, right? So this essay is about teenage years, and this hook is a really good thing and a really good way to draw the reader in, right? The student starts it off by saying, teenage years, this is what it's supposed to be, right? But guess what? It's not, right? It's something completely different. And now as a reader, you're like, okay, what is it then? If teenage years isn't about laughter and memories, then what is it for most people, right? Then they give you the context, the information. It's in blue, right? The information that the reader is going to need to help understand what your paper is about. It says, for most girls, being a teenager is torture. A young woman stands in front of her mirror, contemplating her appearance. She stands there and decides she's not the image of perfection, skinny yet curvy. She turns away from the mirror, unable to look beyond and see that she's flawless in her own way. This unreachable goal of perfection torments her into depression, yet she is still not pleased with what she sees. Every single day, these girls are plagued with the same expectation to be society's definition of perfection. The student, provided information about what most teenage girls go through during this age of trying to look a certain way, trying to reach a very high standard that society puts on them, right? So it's giving you information about what most teenage girls go through, right? This is information that the reader's going to need to help understand your topic. And this leads perfectly into the thesis statement, the argument that this student is making for this paper. It's, these absurd expectations are causing girls as young as the age of 7 to fall victim to self-harm, depression, and anxiety, and countless eating disorders. So the argument that she's making is that at this age for teenage girls, and the pressure that society puts on them, this is what's leading them to do, right? Depression, anxiety, eating disorder, self-harm, right? So that's the argument that she's making in this paper. I think this is a great example of an intro, right? Great hook. It gets you in. It gives you the necessary information in the context, and it states her position perfectly in the thesis statement, right? I'm going to give you an example next of what I wrote for this book. So this is my example, okay? For the intro, before you write, you should always brainstorm, right? So I was brainstorming, and the topic that I decided to write about is hopelessness, okay? I thought hopelessness was a really good thing to write about. There's a lot of examples of it in the book. So before I wrote down anything, I chose my topic and thought of 2 events that I could use for my body paragraphs. I didn't pull quotes or anything. I just thought of 2 events in the book where I could be like, okay, I could go into that part of the book and try to pull a quote from, okay? And after that, it should be a little bit easier to write after you decide. Sorry about that little gap. The bell rang. So after you decide a topic and decide of 2 vague events that happen in the book, it should be a little bit easier to write about. So I decided to write about hopelessness, and I decided what would be a good hook. So I decided to say, started off with a question, right? So I put, life is meant to be a journey of hope and potential, but what happens when all of that is taken from you, right? So I talked about what life is meant to be, supposed to be hope, potential, happiness. And I decided to ask the reader, what happens when hope and potential is taken away from your life? And because that's sort of what happens to Paul, right? And, there's a lot of different ways that you could write a hook for hopelessness. I think a definition would be great, or a quote about hope. But, there's a lot of different ways. I decided to go with the question. That led me into my context, right? We need to provide information about the book and Paul for the reader to help them understand the rest of this essay. So the context is, in the book, Paul joins the war after he graduates high school, and he experiences events that change him forever. He kills, watches his friends die, and feels like there's no going back to his regular life after the war. War has killed his younger self and left him with nothing for the future. So I gave him a little bit of background on Paul, right? He said, I said, Paul joined the war after he graduated high school, right? He didn't get to experience life yet, but he got to experience events that would change him, though, right? Because he experienced war, And then I said some events that happened to him that changed him. He killed people. He had to watch his friends die. And because of those things, he feels like there's no going back to his regular life after the war, right? Then I had a figurative language in there. I did an example of personification. I said war killed his younger self because he says that a lot throughout the book. Then I emphasized that I left him with nothing in the future, right? It's not a whole lot of information, but it's enough information for the reader to understand, hey, Paul's at war. He's still really young, right? He just graduated high school, and he's had to kill and watch his friends die, right? That's all your context can be. You can add a lot more if you want, right? That's up to you. But I think one of the most important parts is your thesis statement. So I said, the events that Paul goes through in All Quiet on the Western Front shows his feelings of having no hope for the future. Right? A common psychological effect of young soldiers who fought in World War I, and many were lost after. So I took a stance of hopelessness, right? A feeling of having no hope for the future for this intro. And I just stated it in the sentence, in the thesis statement, right? Because the question we have to answer for this essay is, what is one mental effect that happened to Paul? Or one change that happened to Paul throughout the book? And I chose having no hope. So I basically stated that in the thesis about what this essay is going to be about is the feeling of having no hope for Paul in this book, okay? You have to state what your essay is about without using the words, this essay is about, I'm writing about. This is a great way of doing that, okay? Hopefully this makes sense. I think it's going to be a lot easier for y'all whenever y'all just start and I start providing feedback about what y'all are writing about. So that's going to lead me into your turn. There's going to be an assignment on the course homepage. It's going to basically look like this. You're going to write a hook, you're going to write context, then you're going to write a thesis statement. Up at the top, you're going to write what your topic is going to be about, whether it's hopelessness, change, powerless, anything like that, right? Whatever you decide on, you're going to put that at the top and just write, right? I just want y'all to at least start and try your hardest. It's a lot easier for me to help you out whenever there's stuff down on the paper, so I know what direction you're heading in, right? So just try your hardest on it. And remember, I'm just going to keep helping you and revising it as we go. I will be taking that as a daily grade, but it's just going to be, I think it's going to be a lot easier to just work on intro. Then after you're done with your intro, go to your body paragraph and just chunk it like that so that you're not working on the whole essay all at once. Because after you're done with the intro, move it to your body paragraph and we just work on each aspect individually. We can just combine them all together at the end and there's your whole essay, right? But just do that for me. I'm going to keep checking those daily and providing feedback as soon as possible, okay? But that's basically it for this wrap up. I just want y'all to keep working on your intro, and then I will go in and I will revise it for y'all. I'll give you feedback. But if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, or you want anything explained further, just let me know. But other than that, that is it for this lesson video, and I'll see you here for the next one. Bye.